Rev up your engines!
Well, I can't resist this one. Jim Farley, president of Ford, says, well, there's slower EV adoption than we thought, so we're going to really push hybrid vehicles now because they're selling a lot of them. To give you a perfect example, the Ford F-150 Lightning electric pickup truck is a dismal failure. People aren't buying them now. The original people who bought them, they just wanted a toy electric truck. They never had a truck before, most of those people. Everybody I met with a Lightning electric truck, they never owned a pickup truck before. And their other cars are Nissan Leafs or Teslas. Right? As if that isn't bad enough. They're saying, oh, well, we're going to push the hybrids, right? Everybody poo-pooed Toyota because Toyota didn't jump in the deep water right away. And they immediately said, oh, Toyotas are scumbags. They're not going to, even though they started the Prius, which was the hybrid revolution. Toyota to this day is saying hybrids make more sense. You use less lithium. You can save the planet better making hybrids than making fully electric cars, right? Well, now, Jim Farley's saying the same thing. He says, well, we're going to push our hybrids because their hybrid F-150s are selling like hotcakes. People like them, right? So now he's done it about face. Now here's something I never realized, that Jim Farley is a cousin of Chris Farley, the comedian. And all the stuff that he says is actually a gigantic joke that he's pulling on the world, being the CEO of Ford Motor Company. Maybe it's one gigantic joke. You got to look at it and laugh. Oh, we're going to be pushing these EVs. Oh, nobody's buying them. No, we're going to push the hybrid cars now. So Toyota's been pushing the hybrids for a long time and they continued to. So if you ask me, they got a lot more sense than the American companies that, hey, let them say one thing, the next day he's saying something else. Well, the electric car business is even starting to fail in China. A company called XPeng that makes electric cars in China lost 7% of its value the other day because people are finding out the sales are going down. People are not buying electric cars, even in China. Turns out they had a 2.7 billion yuan loss in the last quarter, and the stock started to go down. Now, to show you what's happening, now I say, oh, well, in the future, people will buy more electric cars. Listen to this. In 2022, this company had a positive gross margin of 10.9%. They were making 10.9%. But the last quarter of this year, guess what? They had a negative 3.9%. They went from making some profit to losing money. Yeah, and they keep saying, oh, don't worry, we'll lose money for a while with these electric cars, but then we'll start making a profit. Oh, yeah? And this is in China, where the government's trying to force them to buy electric cars, right? Pretty soon there's going to be a gigantic mess of people building cars, no one's buying them, then they're scratching their heads. Gee, what went wrong? Well, maybe you got the wrong idea. Maybe battery electric cars are a stupid idea, you know? But they just keep pushing it, because they've already put money in it. Just like artificial intelligence, self-driving cars. They put billions into it, so they're not going to admit they screwed up and say, oh, we lost all that money. So they keep going forward into the abyss, like the lemmings jumping off the cliff. Even in China, it's starting. Chef Giovanni says, years ago, my uncle told me, dump a cup of water in a car with my Chevy Chevelle 350 when running. It breaks off carbon. We didn't. It ran better. What are your thoughts? Yeah, that was back in the day. You don't want to put too much water in, because if you pour too much water in, it can actually hydrolock the engine. You get enough water, it fills the piston hole, and then the piston has to go up when the valves are closed and it's getting ready to fire, the compression rate. Then there's water and it will bend the piston rod. You can ruin it. We used to do it all the time, but we would put it in like a spray bottle. We get a Windex bottle, throw the Windex out, put water in, spray it, and rev it up. Right? And it really is. It creates steam, which cleans the inside of your engine. But, and this is gigantic but, modern cars have catalytic converters, air-fuel ratio sensors, right? You can destroy all those things. You got a turbo when you do it. If a big chunk comes off, hits the turbo, it will destroy your thousands of dollar turbocharger too. So you can't do that with a modern car. You're really taking a gamble. You know, back in the day, if they were really junky cars, we'd do the same thing, only we get a spray bottle, we put automatic transmission fluid, we'd spray in the carburetors, and that would also clean out a worn-out engine and stuff. But you can't do it in modern cars. You would destroy the anti-pollution equipment. It would cost you a fortune. XL Frenzy says, Scotty, my car knocks in the front by the tire for the first 5 minutes driving and goes away for the day. Here's what you want to do. It could be the simplest fix on earth. Put your front tires in the back and back in the front. If the knocking goes to the back, it's your tires. Tires are made with belts. They have various ply belts wrapped around the core. Then they put the rubber stuff, and then they put them in a giant machine that heats them up and vulcanizes the rubber, right? As they age, a lot of times the belts will stretch. When they sit with the weight of your car overnight, the stretched belts thump. It'll knock. All it is a bad tire. Try that. Now, if it doesn't do that and it's knocking, jack it up some Saturday or Sunday and pull on the wheels. You could have a worn tie rod, ball joint. You could have A-frame bearings, bushings that are going out, lots of stuff. It might just be your tire, though, because if it only does the first thing in the morning, a lot of times the tire's kind of out around. Just like a lot of cars. You get, say you live a minute from the highway. You start your car, you go on the highway. Your steering wheel shakes a little, but then after a minute or two, it goes away. That's the tire stretching out and becoming round as you're going 65 miles an hour. Then they stop shaking. It's the same thing. Crobble said, Scotty, I'm looking for a used 2017 Honda Accord, but they're mostly CVTs. Is that bad? Well, I'm not a CVT fan, okay? I'm not. I just don't like they kind of like old motorboat engines. Really, they make a lot of noise, but they don't take off fast. But it is a Honda, and it's relatively late model. 2017. Honda has excellent engineers. And I do have to say, I think Toyota makes the best CVT transmissions in the world, but Honda makes the second best ones. So they do make a decent CVT. I just personally don't like the way they feel, the way they drive, and when they do break, nobody knows how to fix them. Basically, you throw it away and get another car, or try pot luck with a used one from a junkyard. They're very complex to fix. Hardly anybody knows how to rebuild them, too. So, you always have to look into. Get to digging, says Scotty. I got an 09 Toyota Camry 4-cylinder. I put the AC on high, the motor dies. What do you think it could be? All right, one of two things. You want to pray it's one and not two. One is, let's just say your idle up valve doesn't work. When you turn your AC on, there's a valve that's in your throttle, and it's supposed to make the engine idle up higher to compensate for the load that the AC compressor's dragging, right? If that doesn't work, it'll conk out because there's too much strain, it idles too low, and it stops, right? Pray it's that, because if it isn't, it means your AC compressor's going out. When they go out, they drag the engine so much that at idle, it'll honk your car out. It strains so much horsepower from the engine, it drags it down and makes it stall. And that's pretty expensive. I mean, air conditioning compressors cost a lot of money. And you can't just change just the compressor, because when they go bad, generally the whole system's got problems, and you got to flush it out, change the condenser, change the expansion valve, change the dryer. A lot of guys will change the evaporator. Then you're talking about thousands of dollars. Zoomer says, Scotty, I got a 96 Celica. If my front end is misaligned, can it cause my steering wheel to be stiffer than usual? Well, of course it can, if the tires are pointed in the wrong direction, especially like one's pointed this way and the other's pointed that way. Yeah, the steering's going to get stiff because it's not rolling down the road right. It's a pretty old vehicle. From my experience of those, they often get stiff because the power steering rack just starts to wear out, and it requires too much energy to turn it. But if you want to try this first, I've got a video, how to fix binding power steering. You can flush it out, and I've sometimes flushed out those things, and the binding went away entirely. Gets the crud out of the rack. Scotty Kilmer fan says, Scotty, I want to work with Uber Eats. Should I get a 2015 Toyota Prius? Okay, yes, they're excellent vehicles. They can get great gas mileage, but you're talking about a 9-year-old hybrid car. How many miles is it going to have on it? Now, they're great. They can last a really long time, but generally, almost every single one that I've ever seen, when I got to about 200,000 miles, it needed the battery and or the electric motor replaced. The battery's bad enough, it can cost you $3-4 grand, but the electric motor, it's so expensive. So, if you can find a lower mileage one, by all means. But if you're looking at one that's got, 180, 200,000 miles, unless you're getting it dirt cheap for like $1,000 or something, I wouldn't touch it. Bank person says, Scotty, what do you think of a 2023 Mitsubishi Outlander PHE vehicle? I wouldn't buy one for two reasons. I don't like Mitsubishis. They don't make enough cars. They're nowhere near as good as the Toyotas and Hondas are. And I had a customer with one of those, okay? And here's what happened to it. It wouldn't start. So, brings it in, I got a brand new fancy computer to do electric cars, right? I plug it in, and it gives me this code. I look at the code, and it's a controller. It's got this little safety device on the controller that's a 12-volt system that goes to the big battery, right? It was that part. But in order to change that part, which was only $85, you had to drop the battery system all down. It cost a fortune. You had to take the air conditioning system off because it used the air conditioner to cool the battery. I wouldn't wish one of those on my worst enemy, because as they age, they become endless money pits. Now, you did say 2023. If you're the type of person that will buy a vehicle like that and be happy getting 100,000 miles out of it, it'll probably be trouble-free. But if you're like me, you want to get 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 miles out of a car, stay away from those things. And never buy a used one with high mileage. Ever. You'd be gambling too much. Greggy Huber says, what do you think of the 2023 Nissan Frontier? Okay, those are one of the few Nissans I'd buy. They make decent pickup trucks. They make horrible cars, but for some reason they make decent pickup trucks. Now, after next year, they're not going to make the Nissan Titans anymore. They didn't sell enough last year. I think they sold 15,000 of them. It's not worth them building them, right? But the Frontiers, they're smaller truck. They're excellent trucks. They can last a long time. And it's not like the Nissan with the Jatco front-wheel drive transmissions. Those are rear-wheel drive. Those transmissions are perfectly fine. It's weird. They know how to make a big transmission for rear-wheel drive, but not front. So they're not bad trucks. Not at all. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.